Blood is just liquid in a tube, right? So shouldn't it be completely silent? Have you ever wondered what doctors are actually trying to hear when they press a stethoscope to your arm or your chest? Well, here's the surprising reality. If you have a perfectly healthy artery, blood flow is incredibly quiet, almost undetectable. But if there's a partial blockage, say a narrowing caused by plaque, it creates a truly chaotic medical phenomenon. When blood hits that blockage at high speeds, it churns. It creates these noisy, turbulent vibrations. When a doctor takes your blood pressure and listens as the cuff deflates, they're actually listening for these turbulent noises, known in the medical field as card cough sounds. Heart murmurs, they're exactly the same thing. It's just chaotic, noisy fluid flowing around damaged heart valves. By the end of this lecture, you're going to understand the physics of fluid turbulence, the Reynolds number formula, molecular random walks, and exactly how osmosis reduces swelling. Section 1. The sound of blocked arteries. To figure out where that stethoscope sound comes from, we first have to look at the mechanics of fluid movement. Basically, there are two distinct ways a fluid can travel through any tube. Doesn't matter if it's a pipe in your house or a vein in your arm. The first is laminar flow. This is smooth, quiet, streamlined flow that typically happens at lower speeds. Picture perfectly parallel layers of fluid just smoothly sliding past one another. The second type is turbulent flow. This is chaotic, noisy, and irregular, and it's caused by high velocities or physical obstructions. So, going back to our stethoscope example, plaque in an artery literally disrupts that smooth laminar flow, forces the fluid into a high-speed bottleneck, and boom, it creates that noisy turbulence doctors can hear.
Section 2. Predicting chaos and the Reynolds number.
So we understand the basic idea of smooth versus chaotic flow, right? But how do physicists actually predict when a fluid is going to make that jump into chaos? Well, the primary mathematical tool we use for this is called the Reynolds number, or NR. The absolutely crucial thing to remember here is that this is a dimensionless, unitless indicator. It doesn't measure an amount of fluid, it reveals a threshold. It tells us with absolute scientific precision whether fluid flowing in a uniform tube will be perfectly laminar or violently turbulent. Let's break the formula down step by step, because it brilliantly illustrates how these different physical properties interact. NR equals 2 times the fluid's density times its speed times the tube's radius, and all of that is divided by the fluid's viscosity. In everyday terms, higher speeds, denser fluids, and wider tubes push a fluid toward chaos. But viscosity, the thickness or stickiness of the fluid, acts as the denominator. A thicker fluid actually resists turbulence and stays smooth for much longer. Let's look at how we actually use this to predict things. If you calculate the Reynolds number and it's below 2,000, your flow is dependably laminar, smooth sailing. If it's above 3,000, it's definitively turbulent. But what's really fascinating is that middle zone between 2,000 and 3,000. This is an unstable region, and it's a textbook example of chaos theory. The flow in this zone is so incredibly sensitive that even tiny variations in the tube's roughness can cause it to wildly bounce back and forth between smooth and chaotic. Now, you might be asking yourself, okay, that's great on paper, but what does this actually look like in real life? Let's put the math to the test. Let's connect this to real life with two totally different medical applications. Take the human aorta. That's the largest artery leaving your heart. The blood speed there routinely blasts past a critical value of 35 meters per second. That kind of speed pushes the Reynolds number way past 3,000, which means the flow in the aorta is naturally turbulent. Now contrast that with an IV needle delivering saline into a patient's arm. When we plug in the density, the very low speed, the tiny radius, and the viscosity into our formula, the calculated Reynolds number is exactly 523. That's well below 2,000, which mathematically guarantees a perfectly safe, smooth, laminar flow. Section 3. Diffusion and the random walk. All right, we've mastered macroscopic pipes and blood vessels. Now let's zoom way in, down to the microscopic movement of individual molecules. Because even when a fluid looks completely still to the naked eye, its molecules are actually vibrating and zipping around constantly due to thermal energy. This brings us to diffusion. It's the slow movement of substances due to constant, random thermal molecular motion. Physicists literally call this a random walk. Think of it like this. If you carefully drop a single bead of food coloring into a perfectly still glass of water, it slowly spreads out, right? There's no current pushing it. The dye molecules simply bump into the water molecules randomly until the whole glass is completely evenly colored. Wait, This is important. I really want you to grasp the sheer scale of this microscopic chaos. 10 billion. An oxygen molecule moving through water collides with other molecules 10 billion times per second. Because of this nonstop microscopic pinball effect, the molecule bounces backwards, forwards, sideways, relentlessly. And because of that, its forward progress is unimaginably slow. It only advances a microscopic fraction of a millimeter in a full second. Because this molecular motion is a random walk filled with billions of collisions, we obviously can't use basic velocity math here. Instead, we calculate the average distance using this formula. The root mean square distance traveled equals the square root of 2 times d times time. Now, d is the diffusion constant, and that's completely unique depending on the molecule and the medium it's in. For instance, oxygen has a much larger diffusion constant in air than it does in water. Also, d increases with temperature. If you heat up the liquid, you're adding thermal energy, the molecules move faster, and diffusion speeds up.
Section 4. Osmosis, dialysis, and pressures.
So far, we've just been looking at free diffusion in an open space. But what happens if you drop a barrier right in the middle of this random walk? Cell membranes are semipermeable. Basically, they act like tiny bouncers at a club, letting small molecules through while completely blocking the larger ones. This gives us two absolute game-changer concepts. Osmosis is specifically the transport of water through that membrane, moving from an area of high water concentration to an area of low water concentration. Dialysis is the exact same concept, but for the transport of any other molecule. Both are critical for survival. In fact, your kidneys are constantly using both osmosis and dialysis to pull waste molecules out and balance the water in your blood. Let's ground this with a real-life analogy so you can see it in action. Say you sprain your ankle, and it swells up with fluid. Under your skin barrier, you've now got a really high concentration of water. So what do? You soak that ankle in an Epsom salt bath. Because the bath is full of salt, it actually has a comparatively low concentration of water. So what happens next? Osmosis naturally drives that excess water right out of your body, straight through the semi-permeable barrier of your skin towards the salt. The natural laws of physics literally pull the swelling down. But here's the thing, osmosis isn't just a gentle, passive flow. It generates immense physical force. Osmotic pressure is the back pressure created when fluid builds up so much that its actual physical weight stops any further osmosis from happening. And this pressure is powerful. It provides the rigid structural support, called turgor, that actually allows soft plants and flowers to stand upright against gravity. Even more mind-blowing, if we artificially apply massive pressure to reverse this natural direction, a process we literally call reverse osmosis, we can force the salt out of seawater and create pure, fresh drinking water.
Section 5. Active transport and summary.
Okay, we've seen how nature naturally flows down the gradient. But wait, what if a living organism absolutely needs to move substances the wrong way? What if it desperately needs to pull a substance from an area of low concentration and pack it into an area that is already highly concentrated? To beat the laws of diffusion, biology turns to active transport. This is a brilliant process where a living membrane literally burns cellular energy to force substances across it, completely defying standard osmosis. This is exactly how cypress tree roots manage to extract pure water out of extremely salty swamp water. In human physiology, this is so absolutely critical that your kidneys spend roughly 25% of their total cellular energy just performing active transport to maintain the perfect chemical balance in your body. All right, let's do a quick summary of the key takeaways from today's lecture. We learned that the Reynolds number lets us mathematically predict whether a fluid flow will be smooth or chaotic. We saw that diffusion is an unbelievably slow, microscopic, random walk driven by thermal energy. We defined osmosis as the movement of water across a membrane, and dialysis as the movement of other molecules. And finally, we learned that living cells use active transport to forcefully reverse that natural flow by burning energy. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final practical thought. We established earlier that diffusion is driven by thermal energy, which means molecules spread faster when it's hot. So think about this. If a doctor injects a local anesthetic into your tissue, how much faster would that painkiller diffuse and numb the area if you simply applied a warm compress directly to the injection site? Keep the physics of that random walk in mind and join me for our next explainer where we'll dive even deeper into the practical medical applications of thermodynamics.